"Shut your mouth. Black girls like you don't have the right to defend anyone." The judge's voice lashed across the courtroom. Maya Williams stood at the plaintiff's table, one hand resting on a stack of documents, the other hanging by her side. She could feel every pair of eyes in the room on her, waiting, judging, measuring. Judge Harold Carter leaned forward in his chair, staring at her like she was something that had been dragged in on someone's shoe. "Do you even understand where you are?" he continued, his voice thick with contempt. "This is a courtroom, a court of law, not some street corner where you can run your mouth." Maya swallowed but said nothing. The judge wasn't finished. "Let me make something very clear. This is a courtroom, not a place for a child to play lawyer. So before you say another word, you better start explaining who you think you are." A few people chuckled again, louder this time. Maya felt the heat rise behind her eyes, but she forced her face to remain still. "Your Honor," she said carefully, "I'm here to help Miss Brown present." "I did not ask why you were here," the judge snapped. "I asked who you think you are." He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "A girl with no degree, no license, no experience. People like you don't belong in a courtroom. They clean them." He paused, then added, his voice colder than before, "And let me be very clear about something. Where I come from, children are taught to respect the law. They are taught to respect the court. Apparently, you were not taught those things." The words hung in the air. Maya felt something twist deep in her chest. Not anger, not yet. Something older than anger. Something that felt like a bruise that had never fully healed. The judge looked her up and down slowly. "No discipline, no respect, no proper education, I assume," he said. "And yet here you are, standing in front of me, interrupting legal proceedings like you belong here." Daniel Cole, the opposing attorney, lowered his head slightly, hiding a smile. Behind Maya, Angela whispered, her voice shaking, "Maya, it's okay. Maybe we should just go." But the judge kept talking, his voice now carrying a cruel kind of amusement. "Let me guess," he said. "You watched a few videos online? Read a few articles? Now you think that makes you a lawyer?" More laughter, this time from the back row. Maya's fingers slowly tightened around the edge of the table. "You know what your problem is?" the judge said. "No one ever taught you where your place is. So you walk into rooms like this, talking like you understand the law, like you belong here. But confidence doesn't equal education, and it doesn't equal authority." That one landed. For a split second, Maya couldn't breathe. "No parents teaching you." Her father's face flashed in her mind, sitting at the kitchen table, books open, glasses low on his nose, explaining case law to her like she was already in law school. "Never be the loudest person in the room," he had told her. "Be the one who knows the most." Her mother's laugh, the smell of coffee, the sound of pages turning late at night. "No one teaching you." Maya felt the sting behind her eyes now, but she refused to let the tears fall. She would not cry here. Not in this room. Not in front of these people. She lifted her chin slightly. "With respect, Your Honor," she said quietly. "My parents taught me to stand up when something is wrong." The judge's expression hardened instantly. "Wrong," he repeated. "You think this is about right and wrong? This is about the law. And the law has rules. Rules that people like you don't get to ignore just because you feel like playing hero." "I'm not playing," Maya said. The room went still again. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. "I have payment records, email correspondence, and maintenance reports that show Miss Brown did not violate her lease," she continued. "The eviction notice was filed 3 days after the building was purchased by Reynolds Development Group. The timing suggests this is not about a lease violation, but about removing long-term tenants for redevelopment. Miss Brown has a disabled child and," before she could finish, the judge suddenly slammed his gavel down with such force that the sound exploded through the room. "I told you to be quiet." He was breathing hard now, his face red with anger. "That's it," he snapped. "I've had enough of this." "Bailiff." The bailiff stepped forward immediately. "Your Honor, detain her," the judge said, pointing directly at Maya. "Right now. I'm holding her in contempt of court." Angela gasped. "No, please, she didn't do anything." Maya's heart dropped. "Your Honor, please." she said quickly, her voice breaking for the first time. Just let me present the evidence. That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes, please. This family will lose their home. I said detain her, the judge repeated coldly. Maybe a night in a cell will teach you some respect. The bailiff walked toward her, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Angela stood up suddenly. Please don't do this. She's just trying to help me. Please, Your Honor. Sit down or you'll join her. The judge barked. Maya took a step back as the bailiff approached. Please, she said again, now openly pleading. Your Honor, you can't do this. I have evidence that proves the eviction is illegal. If you would just look at the documents. You should have thought about that before you decided to disrupt my courtroom, the judge said. The bailiff reached for her wrist. Maya pulled back instinctively. Please don't cuff me, she said, her voice shaking now. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just trying to help her. She has a child. He's autistic. They have nowhere else to go. Please, just let me talk. I am done listening to you, the judge replied. The cold metal closed around Maya's wrist with a sharp click. Angela burst into tears. Maya, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Maya tried to pull her hand back. Panic rising in her chest now, real panic. The kind that made it hard to breathe. Please, she said again, tears finally spilling down her face. Please, Your Honor, don't do this. Just let me show you the evidence, please. The second cuff snapped shut. The sound echoed in her ears. The courtroom was completely silent now. No one was laughing anymore. Maya turned her head toward Angela, her vision blurred with tears. I'm sorry, Maya whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry, I tried. Angela was crying so hard she could barely speak. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. The bailiff gently but firmly began guiding Maya toward the side door that led to the holding cells. Maya twisted slightly, looking back toward the judge one last time, desperate. Your Honor, she cried, please, you're making a mistake. Just look at the evidence. Please. But Judge Carter was already looking down at his paperwork, like she was no longer even in the room. Maya's shoulders shook as she was led away, the handcuffs cold and heavy on her wrists, the sound of her own footsteps echoing down the hallway. In the courtroom behind her, Daniel Cole calmly gathered his files. Your Honor, he said smoothly, given the plaintiff no longer has representation present, we request that the court proceed with the eviction order. Angela let out a broken sob. Down the hallway, just before the bailiff pushed open the heavy metal door, Maya stopped walking for half a second. Tears were still running down her face. But something else was there now, too, underneath the fear and the humiliation and the helplessness. Because as the door closed behind her and the sound of the courtroom disappeared, Maya Williams realized something she would never forget. This was not just a hearing anymore. This was a fight. The holding cell was colder than Maya expected. Not freezing, not the kind of cold that made you shiver immediately, but a heavy, concrete kind of cold that seeped slowly into your bones the longer you sat there. The walls were gray. The bench was metal. The air smelled faintly of old paper, dust, and something else, something tired. The bailiff unlocked the handcuffs and gestured for her to sit. You'll stay here until the judge decides what to do with you, he said. Not unkindly, but not kindly either. Just a man doing his job. The metal door closed behind her with a heavy sound that echoed longer than it should have. For a few seconds, Maya just stood there, rubbing her wrists where the cuffs had been. Red marks were already forming around the skin. Her head still hurt where the gavel had hit her. When she touched her temple, her fingers came away with a faint trace of dried blood. She sat down slowly on the metal bench, and then, for the first time since she walked into that courtroom, Maya Williams allowed herself to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears sliding down her face as she stared at the floor. I'm sorry, she whispered to no one. I'm sorry, Angela. I tried. She could see Angela's face in her mind, the fear in her eyes, the way her hands shook, the way her voice broke when the handcuffs clicked around Maya's wrists. And then she saw the little boy David sitting on the apartment floor, carefully lining up his toy cars in perfect rows, the way he avoided eye contact, the way he covered his ears when the hallway got too loud. If they were evicted, where would he go? Kids like David didn't handle change well. Maya knew that. One of her neighbors when she was younger had a son like that. Routine was everything. Same home, same room, same sounds, same path to the kitchen, same window, same corner of the floor. Eviction didn't just mean moving. For a child like David, eviction meant the whole world breaking apart. Before I continue the story, if you feel bad for Maya and this family, please take a moment to like this video and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Because you never know. There might be someone near you listening to this same story right now. Maya pressed her hands together and leaned forward, elbows on her knees, trying to slow her breathing. "You're not helping anyone sitting in a cell," she muttered to herself. Her father's voice answered in her memory, clear as if he were sitting right next to her. "Panic is the most expensive mistake you can make in a legal fight," he used to say. "The moment you panic, you stop thinking. And the moment you stop thinking, you lose." Maya wiped her face with the back of her hand and forced herself to breathe slowly. Think. What did they have? Lease agreement, payment receipts, email correspondence, maintenance requests that were never answered, the timeline of the building purchase, the redevelopment permit filed 2 weeks before the eviction notices were sent to half the tenants in the building. This wasn't random. This wasn't about one family. This was a strategy. Buy an old building, evict long-term tenants, renovate, raise the rent, bring in new tenants who could pay double. It happened in Detroit every year. Everyone knew it. But knowing and proving were two different things. Footsteps approached the cell. Maya looked up as the bailiff returned, this time with an older man in a dark suit walking beside him. The man's hair was gray, his posture straight, his eyes sharp and observant. "Maya," the man said gently. She stood up immediately. "Mr. Bennett." The bailiff unlocked the cell and let her step out into the hallway. "You've got 5 minutes," he said. Mr. Bennett waited until the bailiff stepped a few feet away before speaking again. "I heard what happened," he said quietly. "Are you all right?" Maya touched the side of her head again and gave a small nod. "I've had worse days." He studied her for a moment, then sighed. "You look exactly like your father when you're trying not to cry in front of people." That almost broke her again. "They're going to evict her," Maya said quickly, her voice tight. "If I can't get back in that courtroom, they're going to evict Angela and her son." "Mr. Bennett, the documents prove it." The new owner filed redevelopment paperwork before he filed the eviction notices. "He wants the building empty." "I know," Bennett said. Maya blinked. "You know, I've been watching Reynolds' development for a while," he said. "This isn't their first building, and it won't be their last." Maya stared at him. "Then why hasn't anyone stopped them?" Bennett gave a tired smile. "Because they don't just buy buildings, Maya. They buy time. They buy lawyers. They buy silence. And sometimes, they buy people." Maya immediately thought of the judge. The way he looked at her. The way he wouldn't even read the documents. "You think he's involved?" she said quietly. "I think," Bennett replied carefully, "that powerful people tend to protect other powerful people. And poor families don't usually have anyone powerful protecting them." Maya looked down at her hands. The red marks from the handcuffs were darker now. "I begged him to look at the evidence," she said. "I begged him." "I know," Bennett said. "I cried in that courtroom," Maya whispered. "In front of everyone. I told myself I would never do that again after my father died. I told myself I would never let them see me break." Mr. Bennett was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick, worn envelope. "I wasn't going to give this to you yet," he said. "I wanted you to have a normal life. Your father wanted that too." Maya looked at the envelope, but didn't take it. "What is it?" "It's the last case your father was working on before he was disbarred," Bennett said. "Before the charges. Before the trial. Before everything fell apart." Maya's chest tightened. "What does that have to do with this case?" she asked. Bennett held the envelope out a little closer. "Open it," he said. Maya slowly took it. Her name was written on the front in handwriting she recognized immediately. Her father's handwriting. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the envelope and pulled out the documents inside. Property records, company registrations, financial transfers, names. So many names. Then she saw one name that made her stomach drop, Reynolds Development Group. She looked up at Bennett, her voice barely above a whisper. This is the same company. Bennett nodded slowly. Your father was building a case against them and a few other people. He believed they were working with certain officials to push low-income families out of redevelopment zones. He believed eviction cases were being fast-tracked in certain courtrooms. Maya thought about the judge again, the gavel, the handcuffs, the way he said, "You do not belong here." "This isn't just about Angela," Maya said quietly. "No," Bennett replied. "It never was." Maya looked down at the documents again, then back toward the hallway that led to the courtroom. Her eyes were no longer filled with tears. Now they were focused, sharp, steady. "They picked the wrong family this time," she said. Bennett studied her face for a moment, and then asked quietly, "What are you going to do, Maya?" Maya carefully placed the documents back into the envelope and held it tightly in her hands. "I'm going back into that courtroom," she said. "And this time," she added, her voice calm and certain, "I'm not going back in there to beg." She looked toward the courtroom doors at the end of the hallway. "I'm going back in there to fight." Maya did not go back into the courtroom that afternoon. Mr. Bennett convinced the bailiff to release her with a warning instead of formal contempt charges. But the condition was clear. She was not allowed to speak in the courtroom again, unless she was a licensed attorney representing the case. If she interrupted again, the judge would not hesitate a second time. So instead of walking back into the courtroom, Maya walked out of the courthouse into the cold Detroit afternoon, with a thick envelope in her hands and a storm moving quietly behind her eyes. Mr. Bennett walked beside her down the courthouse steps. Traffic moved slowly on the street. Across the road, a hot dog vendor stood beside a small metal cart, steam rising into the cold air. A group of office workers stood nearby in coats, talking about weekend plans like the world was normal and fair and predictable. Maya stopped at the bottom of the steps. "He's going to evict her," she said. Mr. Bennett didn't answer immediately. He had been a lawyer long enough to know the difference between a question and a statement that sounded like one. "If nothing changes, yes," he said. Maya looked down at the envelope again. Her father's handwriting, her father's case, her father's fight. "They destroyed him," she said quietly. "And now they're doing the same thing to these families." Mr. Bennett adjusted his scarf slightly as the wind picked up. "Your father knew it would cost him," he said. "He just didn't think it would cost him everything." Maya was quiet for a long moment. Cars passed. A bus stopped at the corner. Somewhere behind them, the courthouse doors opened and closed as people came and went, carrying files, coffee, briefcases, ordinary lives. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Maya asked. "Because your father made me promise," Bennett said. "He wanted you to have a life that wasn't built around courtrooms and corruption and people with too much power. He wanted you to be free." Maya gave a small, sad smile. "That didn't work out very well." "No," Bennett admitted softly. "It didn't." Maya looked back up at the courthouse building. Tall, gray, cold. The kind of building that was meant to make ordinary people feel small before they even walked inside. "When is the next hearing?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning," Bennett said. "But Maya, listen to me. You cannot walk in there and do what you did today. Carter is looking for a reason to lock you up properly, and Cole will push for it. They want you out of the way." "Because I'm right," Maya said. "Yes," Bennett replied. "Because you're right." They stood there in silence for a moment longer. Then Maya said, "If I can't speak in court, I'll find another way." Bennett looked at her. "What are you thinking?" Maya opened the envelope again and pulled out a few of the documents. Property transfers, shell companies, signatures, dates. "Reynolds Development is buying buildings through 3 different companies," she said. "But the mailing address for 2 of those companies is the same law office. Daniel Cole's firm," Bennett said. Maya nodded. "And look at this." She pointed to another document. "This redevelopment permit was approved before the building was even purchased. That means someone at the city signed off early." Bennett's eyes narrowed slightly. "That shouldn't happen." "It doesn't happen," Maya said, "unless someone wants it to happen." They started walking slowly down the sidewalk. "So what's the plan?" Bennett asked. Maya thought for a moment. I need proof, she said. Not suspicion. Not patterns. Proof. Money. Emails. Ownership records. Something that ties Reynolds, the law firm, and someone in the city together. That kind of research takes time, Bennett said. Maya shook her head slightly. Angela doesn't have time. They walked another half-block before Maya stopped again suddenly. I know someone, she said. Bennett looked at her. Who? His name is Aaron Patel, Maya said. He lives 3 blocks from my grandmother's house. He's in college for cybersecurity. He helped a community group last year track illegal utility shutoffs. He knows how to find things people try to hide online. Bennett raised an eyebrow slightly. And you trust him? Maya thought about it for a moment. Then she nodded. Yes, I do. That evening, Maya sat at her grandmother's kitchen table with the envelope spread open in front of her. The house smelled like chamomile tea and baked apples. The radio on the counter played an old jazz station at low volume. Her grandmother, Evelyn Williams, sat across from her, watching her quietly. You got hurt, Evelyn said softly, noticing the bruise forming near Maya's temple. It's nothing, Maya said. Evelyn reached across the table and gently turned Maya's face toward the light. The older woman's fingers were warm and gentle, but her eyes were sharp. That's not nothing, Evelyn said. That's a judge who forgot he's supposed to be a man before he's a judge. Maya looked down at the papers again. He said I didn't belong there. Evelyn sat back slowly. Your grandfather fought in a war for this country, she said. Came home and still had to use a separate bathroom. Belonging is a strange word in America, Maya. Sometimes you have to decide for yourself that you belong, because not everyone is going to give you permission. Maya was quiet. He also said my parents didn't teach me anything, Maya said after a moment, her voice softer now. He said I had no discipline, no education. Evelyn gave a small smile. Your father used to read law books at this very table until 2 in the morning, she said. Then he'd go to court the next day and fight for people who couldn't pay him. If that man didn't teach you anything, then I don't know who did. Maya felt her throat tighten again, but this time she didn't cry. I couldn't help her today, Maya said. They took me out in handcuffs and I couldn't help her. Evelyn reached across the table and placed her hand over Maya's. Listen to me, she said gently. There are 2 kinds of people who sit in jail cells. People who did something wrong, and people who stood in the way of someone powerful. You decide which one you are. Maya looked at her grandmother for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I'm going to stop them, Maya said. Not just for Angela. For all of them. For Dad. Evelyn squeezed her hand once. Then you better be smarter than them, she said. Because people like that don't lose politely. Later that night, Maya sat in her small bedroom with her laptop open. The envelope lay beside her. Her father's documents. Her father's fight. She opened her email and typed a short message. Aaron, I need your help. It's important. And it might be dangerous. She stared at the screen for a moment before hitting send. Then she leaned back in her chair and looked at the old watch sitting on her desk, her father's watch, the one he wore every day until the day he went to court and never really came home the same man. Maya picked up the watch and held it in her hand. They think I'm just a girl who talks too much, she said quietly into the empty room. She closed her hand around the watch. They have no idea what they started. Aaron replied at 2:13 a.m. Maya was still awake, sitting at her desk with her father's watch beside the laptop and the envelope spread open like a map of ghosts. When the email notification appeared, her heart jumped a little. His message was short. If this is about what I think it's about, don't write details in email. Meet me tomorrow, 9 a.m. Corner of 7th and Maple. Bring everything. Maya closed the laptop slowly and leaned back in her chair. Outside her window, the street was quiet. A single street light flickered, and somewhere in the distance a siren moved through the city like a long, tired sigh. She picked up her father's watch again and turned it over in her hand. I'm going back in, she whispered to the empty room. But not the way they expect. The next morning, Detroit was gray and cold. The kind of cold that made people walk fast and talk less. Maya pulled her coat tighter as she walked toward the corner of 7th and Maple. The neighborhood was old but alive, small diners. A barber shop that had been there for 40 years. a laundromat with a flickering open sign, and a corner cafe where factory workers, bus drivers, and retired men who woke up too early gathered every morning. Aaron Patel was already there, sitting at an outside table with a laptop and 2 cups of coffee. He was thin, with tired eyes, and the permanent posture of someone who had spent too many years leaning toward computer screens. "You look like you got hit by a truck," he said, as Maya approached. "Close," Maya replied, sitting down. "A judge." Aaron blinked. "That's not a joke, is it?" Maya turned her head slightly so he could see the bruise near her temple. Aaron stared for a second. "Okay," he said slowly. "So we're not talking about a parking ticket case." She slid the envelope across the table. "Read." Aaron opened it and began flipping through the documents. At first, his expression was neutral, focused. Then it changed. His eyebrows pulled together. He flipped faster, then slower. Then he went back to the beginning and started again. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. "My father," Maya said. "Before he died." Aaron looked up at her. "Maya, this is not just eviction fraud. This is money laundering, shell companies, property flipping through layered LLCs. Look at this." He pointed to a page. These 3 companies all bought properties, but they're all registered to different names. But the tax ID numbers are connected to the same parent corporation. "Reynolds?" Maya asked. Aaron nodded. "Yeah, but Reynolds is just the front. There's a bigger company behind this. Real estate investment group. They buy low-income buildings, push everyone out, renovate, then sell to developers for triple." Maya leaned forward. "Can you prove it?" Aaron took a slow sip of coffee and looked at her carefully. "Proving and knowing are different things," he said. "I can find connections, emails if someone was stupid, financial transfers if they moved money wrong. But if these guys are as big as this looks, they're going to be careful." "I don't need careful," Maya said. "I need one mistake. Just one." Aaron studied her face for a long moment. "You're serious about this?" "Yes. You know people like this don't just lose money when cases like this happen," he said. "They lose buildings, contracts, investors. They lose millions. People who lose millions don't just shrug and walk away." Maya didn't look away. "I know." Aaron leaned back in his chair. "And the judge who hit you with a gavel is connected to this?" "I don't know yet," Maya said. "But the redevelopment permits were approved before the buildings were even purchased. Someone in the city is helping them, and the eviction cases keep landing in the same courtroom." Aaron let out a low whistle. "That's not bad luck. That's a system." "Yes," Maya said. "It is." Aaron closed the envelope and pushed it back toward her slowly. "All right," he said. "If we do this, we do it right. No shortcuts, no guessing. We build a timeline. Companies, property purchases, permit approvals, eviction filings, court dates. If the same names show up in the same order enough times, that's not coincidence. That's conspiracy." Maya nodded. "How long?" Aaron thought for a moment. "If I don't sleep. A few days to find something real, maybe sooner if someone was sloppy." Maya stood up. "Start with Reynolds, then the law firm. Then check campaign donations for Judge Carter and anyone in the city housing department." Aaron looked up at her again. "You really are your father's daughter." Maya gave a small, tired smile. "That's what I'm afraid of." Across the city, at that same moment, Angela Brown sat on the edge of the small bed in her apartment, holding an eviction notice in her hands. David sat on the floor lead the window, lining up his toy cars in perfect rows, humming softly to himself. Angela looked around the apartment slowly. The old couch, the small kitchen table, the height marks on the wall where she had measured David every year on his birthday, the window that stuck in the winter, the neighbor upstairs who always brought soup when someone got sick. This was not just an apartment. This was their life. There was a knock on the door. Angela froze. Another knock, louder this time. "Miss Brown?" "Building management." Her hands started shaking. David covered his ears at the sound of the knocking. Angela stood up slowly and walked to the door. When she opened it, a man in a dark coat stood in the hallway holding a clipboard. "You need to start preparing to vacate," he said flatly. You have 72 hours. Angela felt like the floor dropped out from under her. Please, she said. I have a court hearing tomorrow. My case isn't finished. The man shrugged. You can tell that to the judge. I'm just telling you what the order says. He turned and walked away down the hallway, his shoes echoing on the old wooden floor. Angela closed the door and leaned against it, trying not to cry, because when she cried, David got scared. Across town, Maya walked back toward the courthouse alone, her coat pulled tight, her father's watch in her pocket. She stopped across the street and looked up at the building again. People walked in and out, carrying files, coffee, briefcases, like always. Yesterday, she had walked into that building like a girl begging to be heard. Today, she stood on the sidewalk and watched it like a person studying an enemy. Mr. Bennett's words echoed in her head. This isn't just a case anymore. This is a war. Maya looked at the courthouse doors, her eyes calm now. No tears left. No hesitation left. All right, she said quietly to herself. If this is a war, then I'm going to stop fighting like a victim. She turned and walked away from the courthouse, already planning her next move. Tomorrow, she would go back into that courtroom, but this time, she would not be alone. And this time, she would not ask for permission to speak. The next morning, the courtroom was even more crowded than the day before. Word had spread. People in the hallway were whispering about the girl who got handcuffed, about the judge who threw a gavel, about the eviction case that had somehow turned into something bigger than a landlord and a tenant. Maya stood outside the courtroom doors with Mr. Bennett beside her. She wore the same navy blazer, the same simple blouse, her hair pulled back neatly. The bruise near her temple had darkened slightly, a faint shadow against her skin, but she stood straight, calm, and very still. You don't have to go in there, Mr. Bennett said quietly. I can request a continuance. Buy us more time. Maya shook her head. Angela doesn't have more time. They gave her 72 hours. Bennett frowned. 72? That's aggressive. They want her out before anyone can stop them, Maya said. That means we're close to something. Bennett studied her face. Aaron find anything yet? He's building a timeline, Maya said. Property purchases, shell companies, permit approvals, court assignments. If the same names keep appearing in the same order, we can show a pattern. A pattern isn't always enough in court, Bennett said. Maya looked at the courtroom doors. Then we find something that is. Inside the courtroom, Daniel Cole was already setting up at the defense table, flipping through a neat stack of files. He looked up when Maya and Bennett walked in, and a small, confident smile appeared on his face. Well, he said smoothly, I was wondering if we'd be seeing you again. Maya didn't respond. She walked past him and sat beside Angela, who looked like she hadn't slept at all. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she held a folder so tightly her knuckles were white. They gave me 3 days, Angela whispered. Maya, I don't know what to do. David keeps asking why I'm putting things in boxes. Maya put a hand over Angela's shaking hands. Listen to me, she said softly. Do not pack. Do not move anything. Let them think you're leaving. Just wait. Angela looked at her, fear and hope fighting in her eyes. What if we lose? Maya held Hergaze. We're not done yet. The bailiff stepped forward. All rise. Judge Carter entered from the side door, his robe flowing behind him. His expression was exactly the same as the day before, cold, controlled, and faintly irritated, like this entire case was an inconvenience. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and began looking through the file in front of him. Then he looked up and saw Maya sitting at the plaintiff's table again. His jaw tightened immediately. I see we have a repeat visitor, he said dryly. I thought I made myself very clear yesterday. Mr. Bennett stood. Your Honor, Daniel Bennett, attorney at law. I will be representing Miss Brown today. Judge Carter's eyes shifted to Bennett. Mr. Bennett, he said, I didn't realize you were involved in this matter. I am now, Your Honor, Bennett replied calmly. The judge leaned back slightly. Good. Then perhaps we can proceed without any more disruptions. His eyes flicked briefly toward Maya. Maya said nothing. She just sat, hands folded on the table, her father's watch in her pocket, feeling the weight of it like a quiet reminder. Daniel Cole stood. Your Honor, given that the plaintiff has failed to vacate the property and continues to occupy the unit unlawfully, we request that the court finalize the eviction order today. Angela's breathing quickened beside Maya. Mr. Bennett stood. Your Honor, we request a stay of eviction pending review of new evidence regarding the legality of the eviction notice and the redevelopment filing timeline. Cole immediately shook his head. Your Honor, this is a delay tactic. The lease violation is clear, and the new owner has the legal right to reclaim the property. Bennett remained calm. The timing of the redevelopment permit approval suggests the eviction may have been filed in bad faith. Judge Carter looked annoyed. Do you have proof of that, Mr. Bennett? Bennett hesitated for half a second, and in that half second, Maya knew they were still missing something. Your Honor, Cole said smoothly, stepping forward. We cannot allow every tenant in the city to invent conspiracy theories every time a building is sold. My client followed the law. The plaintiff violated the lease. This is a simple case. Simple. Maya looked down at the table, her mind moving quickly. Connecting timelines. Names. Documents. The envelope. Her father's notes. Aaron's research. Simple cases didn't require shell companies. Simple cases didn't require 3-day eviction notices. Simple cases didn't make judges throw gavels. Judge Carter looked at Bennett. If you have evidence, present it. If not, I am prepared to rule. Angela grabbed Maya's hand under the table, squeezing hard, like she was holding onto the edge of a cliff. Maya leaned slightly toward Bennett and whispered, Ask for the property transfer records and the redevelopment permit approval dates to be entered together. Bennett glanced at her, then nodded slightly and turned back to the judge. Your Honor, we request that the court review the property transfer documents alongside the redevelopment permit approval dates. We believe the timeline is relevant to the intent behind the eviction. Cole frowned slightly. Your Honor, the intent is irrelevant. The lease violation is the issue. The intent determines whether the eviction was filed in bad faith. Bennett replied. Judge Carter looked impatient, but he held out his hand. Let me see the documents. Bennett handed them to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. The courtroom was completely silent as Judge Carter flipped through the pages. 1 page, 2 pages, 3. For a brief moment, something changed in his expression. Not much, just a flicker. But Maya saw it. He saw it. He saw the dates. The redevelopment permit approval had been signed before the building was officially purchased, which meant someone had approved plans for a building that the company did not legally own yet, which meant someone with authority had helped them. Judge Carter closed the file slowly. These dates are unusual, he admitted. Cole stepped forward quickly. Your Honor, paperwork timing can vary. That does not invalidate the eviction. No, the judge said slowly. But it does raise questions. Maya felt Angela's grip tighten even more. For that reason, Judge Carter continued, I will grant a temporary stay of eviction for 7 days while this timeline is reviewed. Angela let out a small sob of relief. 7 days. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a loss. Maya closed her eyes for a brief moment, breathing out slowly. 7 days meant time. 7 days meant Aaron could find something. 7 days meant the fight wasn't over. As the gavel came down and the hearing ended, Judge Carter looked directly at Maya again. His eyes were colder now, harder, and this time, there was something else in his expression too. Not amusement, not annoyance, worry. Maya held his gaze for a moment, then stood and helped Angela gather her papers. As they walked out of the courtroom, Angela whispered through tears, 7 days. Maya, you gave us 7 days. Maya shook her head slightly. No, she said quietly. I just bought us time. Outside the courtroom, Mr. Bennett leaned closer to her and spoke in a low voice. You were right about the dates. The judge saw it. Maya looked back toward the courtroom doors. He's part of it, she said quietly. Or he knows who is. Bennett didn't respond. Maya slipped her hand into her coat pocket and wrapped her fingers around her father's watch again. 7 days, she thought. 7 days to prove that this wasn't just an eviction. 7 days to prove that the system was rigged. 7 days to finish the fight her father started. And this time, she was not going to lose. That night, Maya did not go home right away. Instead, she went straight to Aaron's apartment. A small second-floor unit above a convenience store that smelled constantly of fried food and strong coffee. The hallway light flickered as she climbed the narrow stairs, and somewhere a television played too loudly through a thin wall. Aaron opened the door before she could knock. "Please tell me you brought good news," he said. 7 days, Maya replied. The judge granted a temporary stay. Aaron nodded once. That means he saw something in the documents. He saw the permit dates, Maya said, walking inside. He knows something is wrong, or he knows we know. Aaron closed the door and locked it. There were 2 laptops open on his table. Lines of data, property records, and corporate filings covering the screens. I started building the timeline, he said, turning one laptop toward her. Look at this. Maya leaned over the table. On the screen was a spreadsheet with columns. Property address, purchase date, permit approval date, eviction filing date, courtroom assignment, presiding judge. There are 12 buildings so far, Aaron said. All bought by different LLCs, but the LLCs are all registered through the same legal office. Daniel Cole's firm. Maya scanned the list. And the permits? Aaron tapped the screen. That's the interesting part. In 8 of the 12 buildings, the redevelopment permits were approved before the purchase date. Not after. Before. That's illegal, Maya said quietly. It's not just illegal, Aaron replied. It's coordinated. Someone in the city housing department is approving permits early. That lets Reynolds buy the building knowing he can redevelop immediately. Then they file evictions fast. Push everyone out. Renovate. Sell to developers. Maya kept reading. What about the courtrooms? Aaron scrolled down. That's the part you're really going to love. 10 out of 12 eviction cases were assigned to the same courtroom. Maya already knew the answer before she asked. Judge Carter. Aaron nodded slowly. Judge Harold Carter. The room was very quiet for a moment. So it's not just a landlord, Maya said. It's not just a law firm. It's not just one judge. It's a pipeline, Aaron said. Buy the building. Get the permit approved early. File evictions. Send cases to a friendly courtroom. Evictions get approved fast. Tenants get pushed out. Building gets redeveloped. Everyone at the top gets paid. Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear. Not exactly. Something heavier. How much money? She asked. Aaron turned the laptop back toward himself and typed for a moment. If I'm reading these redevelopment sales right, one building alone made them about $8 million in profit, after renovation and resale. $8 million. Maya repeated quietly. And there are at least 12 buildings, Aaron said. Probably more we haven't found yet. Maya sat down slowly in the chair across from him. That's why they pushed Angela so fast, she said. Her building is next. Aaron nodded. Yeah, and if you stop this eviction, you don't just save one family. You jam the whole pipeline. You delay redevelopment. You cost them millions. Maya looked up at him. So they're not just going to sit and watch me do that. No, Aaron said. They are not. He reached over and pulled another document onto the screen. I found something else. Campaign donations. Maya leaned forward again. Victor Reynolds donated to a city council campaign last year, Aaron said. And the council member sits on the Housing and Urban Development Committee. Of course he does, Maya said. And Daniel Cole's law firm donated to a judicial campaign fund 3 years ago, Aaron added. Maya's eyes narrowed. Judge Carter's election. Aaron nodded once. Yeah. They looked at each other across the table. This is bigger than we thought, Aaron said quietly. Maya didn't answer right away. She was thinking about Angela packing boxes, about David covering his ears when people knocked on the door, about her father sitting at the kitchen table, reading case files late at night, believing the law was something that protected people. What do we actually need to win in court? Aaron asked. Proof that the eviction was filed in bad faith, Maya said. Proof that the redevelopment was planned before the purchase. Proof that tenants were targeted deliberately. And if we can show financial connections between Reynolds, the law firm, and city officials, we can argue conspiracy and fraud. Aaron nodded slowly. Emails would be best. Internal documents. Anything that shows they knew what they were doing. Can you get that? Maya asked. Aaron hesitated. I can try. But Maya, If I find something like that, it means we're not just playing with property records anymore. We're digging into people who have lawyers, money, and friends in government. Maya reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her father's watch, setting it gently on the table. My father tried to stop them, she said. He lost his license, his reputation, everything. And in the end, it still didn't stop them. She looked up at Aaron, her eyes steady. I'm not walking away from this, she said. So if you're scared, I understand. You can stop now. Aaron looked at the watch, then at the documents, then at Maya. I am scared, he said honestly, but not as scared as I am of living in a place where people like that get to decide who gets to stay and who gets erased. He turned the laptop back toward himself. Give me 48 hours, he said. If there's something dirty in their emails or financial transfers, I'll find it. Maya nodded. We don't have 48, she said. We have 7 days. And they're already on day 1. Aaron gave a small, grim smile. Then, I guess I'm not sleeping. Later that night, Maya finally went home. Her grandmother was sitting in the living room, a lamp on beside her chair, a book open in her lap, though she wasn't really reading. You ate? Evelyn asked as Maya walked in. No, Maya admitted. Evelyn stood up without another word and walked into the kitchen. 10 minutes later, she placed a plate of warm food on the table. Simple food. Chicken, rice, green beans, the kind of food that made a house feel like a home no matter how hard the world outside was. Maya sat down and started eating, realizing she hadn't eaten all day. You look like your father did when he was working a case he couldn't let go, Evelyn said, sitting across from her. Maya swallowed and looked down at her plate. I think he was working this same case, she said quietly. Just years earlier. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. Then you need to be smarter than he was, she said. Not braver, smarter. Brave men end up in graves or courtrooms. Smart ones live long enough to win. Maya nodded slowly. I have 7 days, she said. If I can prove the eviction is part of a larger fraud, I can stop it. Maybe stop all of it. And if you can't? Evelyn asked gently. Maya looked down at her hands. Then Angela and her son lose their home, she said. And the next family loses theirs. And the next. And the next. And nothing changes. Evelyn reached across the table and put her hand over Maya's again, just like she had when Maya was a child and scared of thunderstorms. Then I guess, Evelyn said softly, you don't have 7 days. Maya looked up at her. You have 7 days to change something that should have been changed a long time ago. Evelyn continued. That's different. Maya sat there for a long moment, feeling the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. 7 days. Not just to win a case. 7 days to expose a system. 7 days to finish what her father started. And somewhere in the city, men in expensive suits were probably already trying to figure out how to stop her. On the second day of the 7, the pressure began to change. Until now, everything had felt like a legal battle. Documents, timelines, courtrooms, arguments. But on the second day, Maya began to understand something her father had once tried to explain to her when she was too young to fully understand. Courtroom battles are the clean part, he had said. The dirty part happens outside the courtroom. Maya was walking home from Aaron's apartment just after sunset when she noticed the car for the first time, a dark sedan, parked across the street from her grandmother's house. The engine was off, but there was someone in the driver's seat. She couldn't see the face clearly, just the outline of a man sitting still, watching the house. Maya kept walking like she hadn't noticed, her pace steady, her face calm. She walked up the steps, unlocked the front door, and went inside without looking back. Her grandmother was in the kitchen washing dishes. You're late, Evelyn said, not turning around yet. There's a car outside, Maya said quietly. Evelyn stopped washing the plate but did not turn around immediately. She simply placed the plate down, dried her hands slowly, and then walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside just a few inches. She looked for about 3 seconds, then let the curtain fall back into place. How long have they been there? Evelyn asked. I don't know, Maya said. I just noticed today. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then that means you're getting close. Maya set her bag down on the table. That doesn't scare you? Evelyn turned and looked at her, and Maya saw something in her grandmother's eyes. She had seen only a few times before, the look of someone who had lived long enough to recognize certain kinds of trouble. I grew up in a time when men in cars watched our house because your grandfather tried to register black voters in Alabama, Evelyn said calmly. Men in cars don't scare me. Men with power and quiet voices, those are the ones you watch carefully. Maya leaned against the table, crossing her arms. Aaron is trying to get into their financial transfers, she said. If we can show money moving between Reynolds, the law firm, and someone in the city housing office, we can prove conspiracy. And the judge? Evelyn asked. Maya was quiet for a moment. I don't know yet, she said. But 10 out of 12 eviction cases going to the same courtroom isn't luck. Evelyn nodded once. No, she said. That's not luck. That same night, 3 miles away in a glass office on the 23rd floor of a downtown building, Victor Reynolds stood by a large window looking out over the city lights. Daniel Cole stood behind him, holding a folder. She gotta stay, Cole said. 7 days. Reynolds didn't turn around. From Carter? Yes. Reynolds was quiet for a moment. That means Carter saw something in the paperwork. Cole opened the folder. We may have a bigger problem than the tenant, he said. The girl. Reynolds finally turned. What about her? Cole slid a printed photo across the desk. It was a picture of Maya being led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, her head slightly bowed, her hair falling forward, the bruise just barely visible near her temple. She's not a lawyer, Cole said, but she reads contracts like one. She spotted the permit timeline in 10 minutes. Carter said she barely spoke, but when she did, she went straight to the weak point. Reynolds looked at the photo for a long moment. What's her name? Maya Williams. Reynolds frowned slightly. Williams, he repeated. That sounds familiar. Cole reached into the folder again and pulled out another document. Her father was Thomas Williams, attorney, disbarred about 10 years ago, charged with evidence tampering and obstruction. Reynolds stared at the paper, then slowly, he smiled. Well, he said quietly, that explains a lot. Cole watched him carefully. You remember the case? I remember he was a problem, Reynolds said. He started asking questions about redevelopment permits and property transfers. He thought he found a pattern. Cole closed the folder. Looks like his daughter found it too. Reynolds walked back to the window, looking down at the city again. People never learn, he said. They think because something is wrong, that means they can fix it. What do you want to do? Cole asked. Reynolds was quiet for a long moment. Nothing illegal, he said finally. We're businessmen, Daniel. We don't threaten people. We don't touch people. We simply remind them how the world works. The next afternoon, Maya left Aaron's apartment after reviewing more of the timeline. Aaron had dark circles under his eyes and 3 empty coffee cups on the table. I found a transfer, he said. Small, but it's there. Consulting fee from one of Reynolds' companies to a housing development consultant. That consultant used to work in the city permit office. Used to? Maya asked. Retired last year, Aaron said. But he approved 6 of the early permits before he retired. That's not enough by itself, Maya said. No, Aaron agreed. But it's a thread. And if we pull enough threads, the whole thing comes apart. Maya finished. As she walked down the stairs and out onto the street, the same dark sedan was parked across the road again. This time, the engine was on. The window rolled down slowly as she walked past. A man in a dark suit sat in the driver's seat. Clean haircut. Calm face. Expensive watch. Miss Williams, he said politely. Maya stopped, but did not step closer. Do I know you? The man smiled slightly. No, but I know who you are. And I knew your father. Maya felt her stomach tighten, but her face did not change. Your father was a very smart man, the man continued. But he made one mistake. He believed that being right was the same thing as being powerful. Maya said nothing. The man rested his arm casually on the window frame. You're a smart young woman, he said. You have your whole life ahead of you. Law school. Career. A future. It would be a shame if you ruined all of that over someone else's eviction case. Maya looked directly at him. Are you threatening me? The man shook his head calmly. No, he said. I'm advising you. There's a difference. He reached into the passenger seat and held up an envelope. Inside this envelope is a job offer, he said. Internship, summer program, one of the best law firms in the state. Recommendation letters, doors opening for the rest of your life. He paused, then added quietly, all you have to do is walk away from this case. The street was very quiet. A car passed at the end of the block. Somewhere a dog barked. Maya looked at the envelope but did not move. And if I don't? She asked. The man's expression did not change. Then the world gets much harder for you, he said simply. Maya thought about her father sitting at the kitchen table, about Angela packing boxes, about David lining up toy cars so the world would make sense, about the judge saying, you do not belong here. She looked back at the man in the car. Keep the envelope, she said. Then she turned and walked away without looking back. Behind her, the man in the car watched her go, then slowly lowered the envelope back onto the passenger seat. He picked up his phone and made a call. She's not going to walk away, he said into the phone. There was a pause on the other end. Then the man nodded once. Yeah, he said quietly. She's exactly like her father. The third day of the 7 was the day Maya realized they were no longer trying to scare her. They were trying to break her. It started that morning when Angela called. Maya had just sat down at the kitchen table with her grandmother, a cup of coffee in her hands, when her phone rang. Angela's name appeared on the screen, and Maya answered immediately. Angela? What happened? Angela was crying so hard she could barely speak. They came back, she said. 2 men from the management company. They said I was damaging the property. They said they're going to file another violation. Maya, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Angela, slow down, Maya said, standing up from the table. What exactly did they say? They said the apartment smells. Angela cried. They said the neighbors complained. They said if the judge sees multiple violations, he won't just evict me. He'll make sure I can't rent anywhere else. Maya closed her eyes for a second. Another tactic. Build a record. Make the tenant look like a problem. Make the eviction look justified. Listen to me, Maya said firmly. From now on, you don't talk to them alone. If they come back, you call me. You call Mr. Bennett. You record everything on your phone. Do you understand? Angela sniffed. I'm scared, Maya. I know, Maya said softly. But that's what they want. They want you scared enough to leave without a fight. There was a small voice in the background. David. Mom? Are we moving? Angela started crying again. Quieter this time, like she was trying not to let him hear. Maya's chest tightened. Angela, she said gently. Put David on the phone. There was a pause, then a small voice. Hello? Hey, David, Maya said, her voice changing completely. Softer now. It's Maya. Mom says we might have to leave, he said. I don't want to leave. My cars are here. Maya swallowed. I know, she said. Listen to me, okay? You don't have to pack your cars. Leave them right where they are. I'm working on something. I'm trying to fix it. There was a small pause on the line. You promise? He asked. Maya closed her eyes. Yeah, she said quietly. I promise. After she hung up, she stood in the kitchen for a long moment without moving. You promised him, her grandmother said quietly from the table. Maya nodded once. I did. Evelyn looked at her carefully. Then you better win, she said. That afternoon, Maya met Aaron again. He looked worse than the day before, unshaven, tired, but focused. I got something, he said as soon as she walked in. Not everything, but something. He turned the laptop toward her. It was an email from an address connected to Daniel Cole's law firm to an address connected to a city housing office. The subject line read, Redevelopment Priority List. Maya leaned closer as Aaron scrolled. Inside the email was a list of addresses. Angela's building was on the list. Next to each address was a note. Permit fast track. Court scheduling request. Target vacancy. 90 days. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. This is it, Aaron said quietly. This shows intent. They planned to clear the building before they even bought it. Maya kept reading. At the bottom of the email was a short reply from someone in the housing office. Understood. Judge assignment will be consistent. Timing should not be an issue. Maya stared at the screen. Judge assignment will be consistent, she repeated quietly. Aaron nodded. That ties Carter into it, or at least someone in the court scheduling system. Maya straightened slowly. This isn't just fraud, she said. This is racketeering, conspiracy, abuse of the court system. Aaron looked at her. Is it enough? Maya thought for a long moment. It's enough to stop the eviction, she said. But if we present this wrong, they'll bury it. Say it's out of context. Say it's fake. We need to present it in a way they can't ignore. Aaron hesitated. Maya, how exactly are you planning to present this? You're not the lawyer. Bennett is. Maya looked at the email again. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out her father's watch, turning it over in her fingers. There's something I haven't told you, she said. Aaron leaned back slightly. What? Maya was quiet for a moment before answering. I took the bar exam last year, she said. Aaron blinked. What? I passed, she said. I'm licensed. Aaron stared at her. Maya, that exam is almost impossible to pass at 19. I didn't tell anyone, she continued. Not even my grandmother. I wasn't going to practice. I didn't want this life. I didn't want courtrooms and judges and people like Reynolds. She looked back at the email on the screen. But I think this is why my father taught me everything he knew, she said. I think he knew one day I would have to finish this. Aaron sat there for a long moment, processing. So what are you saying? He asked slowly. Maya closed the laptop gently. I'm saying, she replied, that in 2 days I'm walking into that courtroom again. She picked up the envelope of her father's documents with one hand and her watch with the other. And this time, she said quietly, I'm not walking in as a girl who talks too much. She looked at Aaron, her eyes steady and calm. I'm walking in as the prosecutor. That night, Maya did not sleep. She sat at her desk with the lamp on, the rest of the house quiet, the city outside her window humming with distant traffic and the occasional siren. The email Aaron had found was printed and laid flat on the desk beside her father's documents. She had read it so many times she could almost see it with her eyes closed. Redevelopment priority list, permit fast track, court scheduling request, target vacancy, 90 days. Judge assignment will be consistent. It was all there. Not just greed, not just one corrupt landlord. A system, organized, planned, executed through paperwork and signatures and quiet conversations in offices where people like Angela Brown would never be invited. Maya picked up her father's watch and checked the time. 2:41 a.m. She opened her laptop and began typing. Not emails. Not notes. A legal motion. Her father had once told her that the law was like a language. If you spoke it well enough, you could walk into any room and be heard. If you spoke it poorly, you could be right and still lose. So she wrote carefully. Motion to stay eviction, based on evidence of fraud, bad faith filing, and coordinated abuse of court assignment process. Every word mattered. Every sentence had to be precise. She cited housing law, fraud statutes, due process violations. She cited cases her father had made her read when she was 15. Cases she had not understood then, but understood now with painful clarity. By the time the sky outside began to lighten, she had finished 12 pages. She printed the motion, stacked the pages neatly, and placed them into a folder with the email Aaron had found, the property records, the permit approvals, and the timeline. Then she sat back in her chair and closed her eyes for just a moment. I hope I'm doing this right, she whispered. In her mind, she could almost hear her father's voice again. You are. Just don't be afraid when the room gets quiet. The next morning, Maya went to see Mr. Bennett. His office was small and old, above a hardware store, the kind of office where the furniture didn't match, and the law books were worn from being used instead of displayed. He looked up when she walked in, and immediately noticed the folder in her hands. You look like someone who made a decision, he said. I did, Maya replied. She placed the folder on his desk and opened it. He began reading silently. After a few pages, his eyebrows lifted slightly. After a few more pages, he leaned back in his chair and looked at her over his glasses. You wrote this? He asked. Yes. This is not the work of a student, he said. Maya hesitated for a moment, then spoke. I passed the bar last year, she said quietly. Bennett stared at her. You're licensed? He asked. She nodded. I never told anyone. I wasn't going to practice. I didn't want this life. Bennett looked down at the motion again, then back at her. Your father would have been very proud of you, he said softly. Maya swallowed but didn't respond. Bennett tapped the papers lightly. This is good, he said. Very good. You're not just arguing eviction anymore. You're alleging fraud and court manipulation. If the judge accepts this filing, he can't just sign an eviction order and move on. He has to address the evidence. That's the idea, Maya said. Bennett nodded slowly. You understand what happens if you file this, don't you? Maya met his eyes. They stop trying to scare me, she said, and they start trying to destroy me. Bennett didn't smile. Yes, he said. That's exactly what happens. He closed the folder. Then we file it, he said. Maya shook her head slightly. No, she said. I file it. Bennett watched her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. All right, he said. Then you walk into that courtroom as counsel. Not as a helper. Not as a girl with papers. As the attorney on the record. Maya felt her heart beat a little faster, but her face remained calm. That's the plan. Across the city, in the same glass office, Daniel Cole stood in front of Victor Reynolds' desk again. She filed a motion, Cole said. Reynolds looked up sharply. What kind of motion? Cole placed a copy on the desk. Fraud. Bad faith eviction. Court assignment. Manipulation. Reynolds' expression darkened as he read. Where did she get this information? We don't know, Cole said. But she attached documents. Permit timelines. Property transfers and… He hesitated. An email. Reynolds looked up. What email? Cole slid the printed email across the desk. Reynolds read it once. Then again. For the first time since Cole had known him, Victor Reynolds did not look calm. Find out where she got this, Reynolds said quietly. We're trying, Cole replied. But there's something else. Reynolds looked up again, impatient now. What? Cole took a breath. She's not just some kid helping a tenant, he said. I checked with the state bar this morning. He placed another paper on the desk. Her name is Maya Williams, he said. And she's licensed to practice law in this state. Reynolds stared at the paper. Then slowly, very slowly, he leaned back in his chair. And now, he said quietly, this is a problem. The day of the next hearing arrived cold and gray. Maya stood outside the courthouse again, but this time everything felt different. She wasn't carrying loose papers in her hands. She carried a proper file. She wore a dark suit instead of a blazer. Her hair was pulled back neatly. The bruise near her temple had faded to a faint shadow, but it was still there. A quiet reminder. Mr. Bennett stood beside her but slightly behind, like a mentor watching a student walk into an exam he already knew she was ready for. Nervous? He asked. Maya thought about it for a moment. No, she said. I'm angry. Bennett nodded. Good, he said. Anger, when controlled, is useful. Just don't let it talk for you. Let the law talk for you. Maya took a slow breath and looked up at the courthouse doors. They humiliated me in there, she said quietly. They handcuffed me. They tried to scare Angela. They tried to buy me. They watched my house. Bennett didn't say anything. Maya's hand closed around her father's watch in her pocket. They think this is their courtroom, she said. Then she looked at Bennett, her eyes steady and calm. Today, she said, I'm going to remind them whose law it is. And with that, Maya Williams turned and walked toward the courthouse doors, ready to walk back into the room where they had tried to silence her this time, not as a girl begging to be heard, but as a lawyer they could not ignore. The courtroom was already full and Maya walked in. But this time the room did not sound the same. Last time, there had been laughter, whispering, amusement, people waiting to see a young black girl embarrass herself in front of a judge who had already decided she didn't belong. This time, people were whispering for a different reason. That's her. That's the girl who got arrested. I heard the judge threw a gavel at her. No, I heard she's actually a lawyer. Maya heard the whispers as she walked down the aisle. But she did not look left or right. She walked straight to the plaintiff's table, placed her file down, and sat beside Angela, who looked at her like she was looking at a lifeline. You look different, Angela whispered. Maya gave a small, calm smile. "I am different today," she said. At the defense table, Daniel Cole watched her carefully, no smile on his face this time. "Your Honor," the bailiff called. "All rise." Judge Carter entered the courtroom, adjusting his robe as he walked. He sat down, looked at the file in front of him, then looked up. His eyes landed on Maya. For a moment, the room was completely silent. "I see you're back," he said slowly. Maya stood. This time, her voice was clear, calm, and professional. "Maya Williams, attorney for the plaintiff, Your Honor." You could feel the shock move through the room like a wave. Angela turned and stared at her. Daniel Cole's head lifted slightly. Even the bailiff looked over. Judge Carter's eyes narrowed. "Attorney?" he repeated. Maya reached into her file, removed a document, and handed it to the bailiff. "My bar registration and appearance filing, Your Honor." The bailiff carried the paper to the bench and handed it to the judge. The judge read it once. Then again, when he looked up, his face had changed. Not softer, not kinder, but more careful. "Well," he said slowly, "it seems I underestimated you, Miss Williams." Maya did not respond. Daniel Cole stood. "Your Honor, before we proceed, the defense would like to review this new filing and—" "No," Maya said calmly. "You've had the eviction notice filed for weeks. You've had the redevelopment permits for months. You've had this entire process planned long before my client ever stepped into this courtroom. We are not delaying this any further." Cole turned toward her. "You're making very serious accusations for someone so young, Miss Williams." Maya met his eyes. "Then I suggest you listen very carefully." The courtroom went quiet again. Judge Carter leaned back slightly. "Proceed," he said. Maya opened her file and walked to the center of the courtroom. "Your Honor, this case is not a simple eviction," she began. "This is a coordinated effort to remove low-income tenants from properties scheduled for redevelopment. We have evidence that redevelopment permits were approved before the properties were legally purchased." She handed documents to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. "We also have evidence," she continued, "that multiple eviction cases tied to these redevelopment projects were intentionally scheduled in the same courtroom." A murmur moved through the room. Daniel Cole stood quickly. "Your Honor, this is speculation and conspiracy theory. None of this changes the fact that the tenant violated the lease." Maya turned toward him. "Would you like to talk about the lease, Mr. Cole?" she asked calmly. "Or would you like to talk about the email your firm sent titled Redevelopment Priority List?" The room went completely still. For the first time, Daniel Cole did not have an immediate response. Maya removed a printed email and held it up. This email lists properties marked for fast-track permits, fast-track evictions, and, quote, target vacancy in 90 days. She handed the email to the bailiff. "It also states," she continued, her voice steady, "that court scheduling would be consistent." Judge Carter's face had gone very still as he read the email. Maya continued speaking, each word clear and controlled. "This means the evictions were planned before the buildings were even purchased. It means tenants were targeted. It means the court system was used as a tool to clear buildings for profit." Daniel Cole found his voice again. "Your Honor, we object to the source of this email and the way it was obtained." Maya jut in, calm but sharp. "You can object all you want, Mr. Cole, but you cannot explain why the permits were approved before the purchase dates. You cannot explain why the same law firm represents every purchasing company, and you cannot explain why 10 of these cases were assigned to this courtroom." The courtroom was silent enough to hear someone shift in their seat. Maya turned back to the judge. "Your Honor," she said, "this court has the authority to stop an illegal eviction. But more than that, this court has the responsibility to ensure it is not being used as part of a fraudulent scheme." She paused, then added quietly, "My father once told me that the law is only as strong as the people who are brave enough to enforce it." She looked directly at the judge. "So today, Your Honor, the question is not whether my client can be evicted." She placed her hands on the table in front of her. "The question is whether this court is going to be part of this scheme," she said, "or the court that stops it." No one spoke. Not Angela, not Cole, not the spectators. All eyes were on Judge Harold Carter, because for the first time since this case began, the most powerful man in the room was no longer the one sitting behind the bench. It was the young black woman standing in the middle of the courtroom, holding the truth in her hands. Judge Carter did not speak immediately. He sat there, the printed email in his hands, the courtroom so quiet that the faint hum of the overhead lights became almost unbearably loud. Maya did not move. She stood at the center table, her hands resting on the file, her father's watch in her pocket, her eyes fixed on the man who had humiliated her, handcuffed her, and tried to silence her. Daniel Cole shifted first. "Your Honor," he said, trying to regain control of the room. "This is highly irregular. This email could have been obtained illegally. It could be taken out of context. And it certainly does not prove that my client filed an unlawful eviction. The lease violation, Maya said calmly, turning toward him, was filed 3 days after the redevelopment permit was approved and 2 days after the property transfer was scheduled but not completed. The tenant was marked for removal before the new owner even legally owned the building." Cole's jaw tightened. "That is your interpretation." Maya opened another document and held it up. "No," she said. "This is your company's internal timeline." She handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "This document shows projected renovation costs, projected resale value, and projected vacancy date." Maya continued. "The projected vacancy date is listed as 90 days before any eviction notices were filed." Judge Carter read the document slowly, his face giving nothing away now. Maya took one step forward, her voice steady but filled with quiet force. "This was never about unpaid rent," she said. "This was never about a lease violation. This was about clearing a building full of people who didn't have money, lawyers, or power." Angela was crying quietly behind her now, but trying not to make a sound. Maya continued, "My client was not behind on rent. She did not damage the property. She did not violate the lease in any way that justified emergency eviction. But she was a single mother with a disabled child living in a building that someone decided was worth more empty than occupied." Daniel Cole spoke again, sharper now. "Your Honor, this is emotional manipulation, not legal argument." Maya turned and looked at him. "You want legal argument?" she asked. "Let's talk about legal argument." She opened her file and began reading calmly. "Fraudulent misrepresentation in property acquisition and tenant removal. Abuse of court scheduling process to influence eviction outcomes. Collusion between private developers and public officials to manipulate housing permits. Violation of due process through accelerated eviction under false pretenses." She closed the file. "That's the legal argument," she said. The courtroom was completely silent. Then, from the back of the room, a voice spoke. "Your Honor, I believe that will be enough." Everyone turned. A man in a dark suit stood near the back wall, holding a badge in one hand and a folder in the other. "Special Agent Mark Sullivan, Federal Bureau of Investigation," he said calmly as he walked forward. "We've been investigating Reynolds Development Group, Daniel Cole and Associates, and several officials in the city housing department for the past 11 months. You could feel the air leave the room." Daniel Cole went pale. "This is outrageous," he said. "Your Honor, you can't allow." "We can," Agent Sullivan said, placing a thick folder on the evidence table, "because we have financial records, wire transfers, internal emails, and campaign donation records that establish a pattern of bribery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit unlawful eviction and property seizure." Victor Reynolds, who had quietly entered the courtroom and was sitting behind Cole, slowly stood up. "This is a civil eviction hearing," Reynolds said, his voice controlled but tight. "This is not a criminal court." Agent Sullivan looked at him. "You're right," he said. "But sometimes civil cases expose criminal operations." He opened the folder and removed several documents. Payments made from Reynolds Development Shell Companies to a housing permit consultant. Donations made to a judicial campaign fund connected to this Lude. He stopped himself, then continued calmly. "Connected to this court's election cycle. Internal communications discussing fast-tracking eviction cases through specific courtrooms." He looked at Judge Carter when he said that last sentence. The entire room followed his gaze. Judge Carter's face had gone pale, but he quickly straightened in his chair. "Agent Sullivan," he said carefully, "are you accusing this court of wrongdoing?" "I'm saying," Sullivan replied calmly, "that the court system was used as part of a larger operation. Whether knowingly or unknowingly is part of the investigation." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Maya stood very still, her heart beating hard but her face calm. This was the moment. The moment when everything that had been hidden in documents and envelopes and late-night research was finally standing in the open. Daniel Cole tried one last time. "Your Honor, this is completely inappropriate for an eviction hearing. I request this court ignore these theatrics and proceed with the eviction order." Maya turned slowly toward the judge. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "if you sign that eviction order today, you are not just evicting a mother and her child." She paused. "You are signing a document that becomes part of a federal investigation." The words settled over the courtroom like a final verdict. Judge Carter looked down at the papers in front of him. His gavel sat on the bench beside his hand, the same gavel he had thrown at her head days earlier. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, he spoke. "This court," he said slowly, "is issuing an immediate stay on the eviction of Angela Brown pending federal investigation into the redevelopment practices connected to this property." Angela covered her mouth and began to cry. Judge Carter continued, his voice tighter now. "This court will also submit all records related to similar eviction cases to federal investigators for review." He paused again, then looked directly at Maya. "Miss Williams," he said, "it appears I did, in fact, underestimate you." Maya held his gaze. "You didn't underestimate me," she said quietly. "You underestimated the truth." No one spoke after that, because everyone in that courtroom understood that something much bigger than an eviction case had just been exposed, and that the fight Maya's father started years ago had just walked back into a courtroom and won. 3 months later, the building on Maple Street was still standing, and Angela Brown was still living in apartment 2B. On a quiet Saturday morning, sunlight came through the small kitchen window as Angela stood at the stove making pancakes, while David sat on the floor lead the table, lining up his toy cars in the same careful rows he always made. Red car, blue car, yellow car, green car. Perfectly straight, perfectly spaced. His world, still in order. "You're burning them," Angela said softly, as David stared very seriously at the line of cars. "I like them a little burnt," he replied without looking up. Angela smiled a little and flipped the pancake anyway. There was a knock on the door, and both of them froze for a split second. That had become a habit now, the fear that every knock might be someone telling them to leave. But then Angela looked through the small peephole and smiled. "It's Maya," she said. David stood up immediately and ran to the door. When Angela opened it, Maya was standing in the hallway holding a small box. "You still live here?" Maya said with a small smile. Angela laughed softly, but her eyes filled with tears. "Because of you," she said. Maya shook her head. "No," she replied. "Because of the law. We just made the law do its job." David looked up at her. "I didn't pack my cars," he said. "I left them like you said." Maya knelt down to his level. "Good," she said. "That was a very smart decision." He nodded seriously, then took one of the cars and handed it to her. "You can have this one," he said. "So you remember." Maya took the small blue car and closed her fingers around it like it was something much more valuable than plastic. "I will," she said quietly. "I promise." Across the city, things were not as calm. Reynolds Development Group was under federal investigation. Daniel Cole's law firm was being audited. 2 officials from the city housing department had resigned, and Judge Harold Carter had been placed on administrative leave pending review of court assignment procedures. The newspapers called it a corruption probe. The people in Angela's neighborhood called it something else. They called it justice. That afternoon, Maya sat in her grandmother's backyard, a cup of tea in her hands, her father's watch on the table beside her. The air smelled like cut grass and summer beginning to arrive. Evelyn sat across from her, watching her vnimatilna. "You look different," Evelyn said. Maya smiled slightly. "I feel different." "Because you won?" Evelyn asked. Maya thought about the question for a long moment. "I don't think I won," she said finally. "I think I just stopped them from winning." Evelyn nodded slowly, like that was the right answer. "They offered me a job," Maya said after a moment. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Who did?" "The U.S. Attorney's Office," Maya said. "They want me to work in the fraud division after I finish law school." Evelyn smiled a little. Your father always said you would end up on the side of the people who ask the hard questions. Maya picked up the small blue toy car David had given her and rolled it slowly across the table. I used to think the law was something that hurt people like us, she said. Something used by people with money and power. And now? Evelyn asked. Maya looked down at the toy car, then at her father's watch. Now I think the law is like this watch, she said. By itself, it's just gears and metal and numbers. But in the right hands, it can tell you when it's time to stand up. Evelyn reached over and squeezed her hand gently. You know what your father used to say the night before every big case? Evelyn asked. Maya shook her head. Evelyn smiled softly. He used to say, the truth is quiet. That's why you have to speak for it. Maya felt her throat tighten slightly, but she smiled. A few days later, Maya walked back into the courthouse again. But this time she wasn't there for Angela. She was there for another family, and another case, and another file. As she walked down the hallway, people recognized her now. Some nodded, some smiled, some just moved out of her way. Near the courtroom door, she stopped for a moment and looked at the wooden bench where she had once sat in handcuffs, crying because she thought she had failed. She could still remember the sound of the metal cuffs closing around her wrists, the laughter, the judge's voice telling her she didn't belong. She reached into her pocket and touched her father's watch, then the small blue toy car. Then she opened the courtroom door and walked inside. Years later, people would still talk about the case that started with a simple eviction and ended with a federal investigation. Law students would study it. Journalists would write about it. And in certain neighborhoods in Detroit, parents would tell their children about the young black lawyer who walked into a courtroom alone and refused to be silent. But the part of the story Maya remembered most was not the courtroom, or the judge, or the federal agents. It was a small boy sitting on the floor, lining up toy cars, asking one simple question, you promise? And every time Maya Williams walked into a courtroom after that, she carried two things with her, her father's watch and a small blue toy car, because justice, she had learned, was not about winning arguments. It was about keeping promises. This story carries a simple but powerful lesson. Justice does not belong only to the rich, the powerful, or the people who sit behind the highest desks. Justice belongs to those who are brave enough to stand up when something is wrong, and strong enough to keep going when the world tries to silence them. Maya's story is not just about winning a case. It is about keeping a promise, protecting people who cannot protect themselves, and finishing the fight that someone else started. The story reminds us that the law, by itself, is only words on paper, but in the hands of a person with courage and integrity, it becomes a voice for the forgotten, the weak, and the unheard. And sometimes, changing the world does not start with power. It starts with one person who refuses to walk away. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.